Hey, folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. It is Friday, August 23rd. I'm Alan Saunders. Thanks for joining me again for another episode here. I apologize, we're a little bit late this morning. The Steelers do not have practice today. They will have a closed walkthrough on this Friday before they travel to Detroit for their Saturday preseason game against the Detroit Lions, the third and final preseason game of the 2024 season. So, sorry, getting a little bit of a late start this morning. Apologize, but I promise I'm going to get up to you. So yesterday, as I was at practice, phones are buzzing, sitting there on the sideline at UPMC Rooney Sports Complex as the Philadelphia Eagles traded for Washington Commanders wide receiver and former Penn State Nittany Lion, Jahan Datson. And my first reaction, if you follow me on X at @Saunders_PGH, you saw my first reaction because it was, I'm really surprised that the Steelers weren't involved there. The Commanders traded Dotson to the Eagles inside the NFC North for a third-round pick and 2 sevenths with a fifth going back to Washington. So basically a third and 2 sevenths for Dotson and a fifth. That's probably about the equivalent of just sending a fourth-round pick, something like that. I'd have to do the math, but it's not a lot for a guy who was a first-round pick 2 years ago. Now, Dotson hasn't had two great seasons. And was reportedly not even working with the first team in Washington all this training camp. But he also, in those two not great seasons, had the likes of Sam Howell and Carson Wentz and Heineke throwing him the football. So, not exactly the world's greatest offensive environment. Also, Washington has a new GM, Chris Peters, and so I think a lot of what they're doing is probably just trying to get their own people in there, and as opposed to anything that there's a problem with Dotson. The reason I'm sort of curious about the Steelers not being interested in this is that, obviously we've talked for months about their pursuit of Brandon Aiyuk all the way back to since before the draft, and that continues. There's still an offer on the table. It's still a legitimate option. Nothing has really changed fundamentally over the last week and a half. The Steelers have an offer out there. The 49ers understand the offer. They have sort of said if there is a trade that they have okayed that offer, but they're not happy with it. And they're still trying to sign Aiyuk to a long-term deal, but there hasn't really been any action on that front either, not recently anyway. But the whole process is a little bit confusing for me. If you go all the way back to the beginning, right? I mean, we look at the Steelers need a wide receiver because they traded Deontay Johnson. Trading Deontay Johnson was a choice that the Steelers made. They didn't have to do it. They certainly could have paid him what he was making to play here. And they did need a cornerback. They got Dante Jackson for Deontay Johnson, but there were plenty of cornerbacks out there in the free agent market. In fact, there are still plenty of cornerbacks out there in the free agent market. Xavier Howard, with his weird off the field issues aside, is still out there. I think Adoree Jackson is still out there. Eli Apple is still out there. You find a corner. Patrick Peterson is still out there. They traded away Deontay Johnson and introduced this need at wide receiver. They talked to some wide receivers in free agency, and those wide receivers were generally middle of the road types. They had a visit scheduled with Mike Williams. They talked to Tyler Boyd. Those are not superstar players. Those are guys who might be a wide receiver too, alongside George Pickens. It seemed like that's what they were looking for. They go into the draft. The trade talks between the Steelers and the 49ers fall apart. They end up not making the deal for Aiyuk. And they draft Roman Wilson in the third round. Not a wide receiver 2, maybe a wide receiver 3 this year, maybe a wide receiver 2 down the line. Really doesn't fit the need they were looking to fill. And since then, they've really shown no public interest in any other wide receiver. There was a whole laundry list of late in the free agent class wide receivers that came and went that weren't great. Guys like DJ Chark and Zay Jones and, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. None of these players were even good wide receiver 2s, but they're probably better than what the Steelers had. And they all just came and went. There was no interest from Pittsburgh at all, really, in that whole crop of players. Michael Thomas still out there. They did call, I know, at one point, but no traction on that. And now Jahan Datson comes available. Jahan Datson from Penn State. I'm sure the Steelers scouted him well. He's a college teammate of Pat Freiermuth, I believe. And, for a third, let's just call it a fourth-round pick. It's basically what it is here. That's not that much. And you can tell that the Steelers did not even come close to meeting the offer that was on the table, if they were interested at all, because the Commanders traded him inside the division. And so even if they probably would have taken less to trade him to Pittsburgh than he was traded to Philadelphia for. So the Steelers just aren't fishing. This is sort of like the equivalent of saying, I'm going to go buy a car. I'm going to go look at a Ferrari. And if me and the dealer can't agree on a price on this Ferrari, I'm just going to take the bus to work. It's a very, very strange outlook. And look, Omar Khan has done a great job. I think he deserves a lot of credit, a lot of leeway here. But if the Steelers don't get Aiyuk and they don't get anyone else, it's going to be very fair to look at this offseason and say, what was Omar Khan thinking? And how did the Steelers put themselves in a position where they entered the season with such an obviously deficient wide receivers room? Maybe it'll work out. I reported, feels like forever ago now, that the Steelers feel that the offer that they made that the 49ers have on the table will eventually lead them to land Brandon Aiyuk. And maybe they're right. But man, if they're not, it's been a very strange ride. And I'm still not sure I fully understand it. But yeah, that's that. Let me know what you'll think. I know you guys are sort of tired of hearing about the Aiyuk thing, but like, should the Steelers have entertained thoughts about Jahan Datson? I mean, it's not. We talked about the player a lot, myself and Smitty and DB on an episode of Afternoon Drive. I believe it was a week ago today. We talked about the player, not a perfect fit. Now, a lot of these guys are not perfect fits. Aiyuk isn't a perfect fit. He's too expensive. Man, I don't know. I think there's somebody at some point needed to be in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, and the fact that there isn't, it's a little bit curious to me, and a little bit curious that they weren't interested in. And not only that, there wasn't even any leaked interest in this trade as like a poke or a prod at the 49ers and say, hey, man, maybe we'll just go somewhere else. I know that doesn't really threaten the 49ers much. They'd be tickled if the Steelers exited the market, but I don't know. The last thing I want to say about this is I saw a lot of people on Twitter say yesterday after this trade, oh, this means the Commanders are getting Aiyuk. I don't buy that at all. If the Commanders were getting Aiyuk, they would have wanted Dotson to be a part of that trade to the 49ers. The 49ers don't want draft capital. That's one of the reasons they have not pulled the trigger on the Steelers deal, is that they don't really like it, even if they're acknowledging that it's largely fair and the best deal they're likely to get. The Commanders could have traded Dotson for Aiyuk, Dotson plus for Aiyuk, and that probably would have been a trade that the 49ers would have taken. No, I don't think this makes the Commanders more likely, although all along I've thought they were a team that you should watch out for and was under talked about in the Brandon Aiyuk sweepstakes, but I think them trading Dotson makes it less likely they'll make that move, not more. That's it for me for today. We'll be back with another episode of Afternoon Drive later. I believe DB is joining me, and Smitty will be back for sure from his baseball hiatus with the Washington Wild Things. Saw some pictures. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it on the Afternoon Drive. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive. Of course, you can find us anywhere you get podcasts, on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything like that. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. And check out all my written work at SteelersNow.com. We're releasing a new feature today for Steelers Now Plus subscribers, SM Plus. So if you aren't, you're going to want to be one of those. Check it out. We'll talk about it later on the Afternoon Drive with me and Smitty. Until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.